All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick!
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa. And as an epilogue to our summer movie fan fest, we bring you an episode that has been many months in the making. This is Better Let Me Tell You's DJ, the one and only. We've had your esteemed partner Ish on here, and he's killed it. So we're definitely going to compare. Here.
But the bar's high. So
no pressure. No pressure. So thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm really excited about this.
I'm glad you're excited because I'm excited, and I need your energy to match mine. All right, because I need to feed off your steam here. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done with every guest who's come on our podcast for the first time is ask, what was your introduction to horror and why was it important for you?
Okay, so I'm actually going to break a lot of hearts here because I am not a huge horror fan in terms of the genre like you guys are. For me, it's more like a case-by-case thing. The Shining, since I was a little kid, I was always sort of obsessed with that movie. And as I became older and I started understanding more about like the movie and the psychological aspects of the movie, and then when I became even older, I became a movie buff, and I started learning about like Stanley Kubrick and all the like technical aspects of how the original was shot and all that. I guess I became a Shining expert. I mean, look, I have my Jack Torrance.
Oh,
you guys see him there?
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. It's got the axe.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, it does. And I've actually been to one of the hotels. I've been to the Wahi Hotel in Yosemite, which the interior of the Overlook Hotel is based on. And I have to tell you, that's how big my fandom is.
Right.
I went to this hotel. That it's, I don't know if you guys have been to it. It is a replica of, well, the movie is a replica of the hotel. It is quite something to see those red elevator doors, to see the Colorado Lounge. I mean,
the Colorado room is just, oh man, I can't imagine.
It is quite something if you are a fan of the movie. So that's how big my fandom is. My goal is to go to all three hotels associated with the movie, but we can talk about that later.
That's great. So we have the Better Let Me Tell You podcast. It's amazing that the podcast is coming in to make this comment, although I'm assuming it's Ish. So hi, Ish.
Yes.
Saying, look at the branding, kick ass, DJ.
Yeah. I can't multitask that much.
That's awesome. So I'm glad that you are so passionate about The Shining. Unfortunately, I forgot because my memory is like shit.
Yeah, it's dog shit.
It's not like shit. It is shit. All right. I have like a turd sitting in that part of my brain. Okay. And when we did The Shining, last year or the year before,
it was right around this time last year.
Yeah, I think so. It totally skipped my brain. It was just like right over my head, and I knew that it was your favorite horror movie, not just favorite horror movie, favorite movie. And totally forgot, didn't ask you to be on the show. And so when you found out, you came to me and rightfully so said, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, hang on a second.
And we have talked about this like
a lot.
And it's not like, well, you're the type of person I see once every 2 years. Like, I see you and Stephanie or communicate with you with enough.
Every couple weeks we see each other, So I was like, man, I goofed. I'm so sorry. We can't do The Shining again because we just did it. Maybe in a couple of years, but we could definitely do Dr. Sleep. And you were on board. I was like,
yeah,
so excited that you were on board for that, because at that point when we were talking about this, we had not yet done a Mike Flanagan movie. And now we're coming off of doing a Mike Flanagan movie 2 weeks ago. So also, I'm really happy.
Also coming off a Joe Hill movie.
Yeah. So I'm really, really excited because this movie is so special to a lot of people, right? Because it not only serves as an adaptation to Stephen King's novel, right? Which was hugely popular, hugely successful. The fans ate it up, right? But it also serves as a bridging, a reconciliation, if you will, of the literary Shining and the cinematic Shining. Mm-hmm. Because these are two very different things.
Extremely so.
Yeah, there's things that you say, okay, well, the movie had to do it differently because, like, in 1980, you couldn't do topiaries that come to life.
Yeah, the CGI was not there.
Yeah, you couldn't do that, right? To put that in perspective, what came out that year was Tron, right? And Tron, for as advanced as it was, as great as it was, that gives you an idea of what CG was on the cutting edge. There's no way they could have done this, right? Yeah. So the hedge maze works, but the whole ending of the movie and the representation of Jack, I think, is very, very different from the novel. So you have now a work that is serving so many different functions, not just adapting the one story, but making that one story in a film work with the film that adapted the previous story and with the book that the book it's adapting is sequeling. So lots of really weighty stuff here.
Hold on, let me get the old flow chart.
it had an almost impossible task ahead of it.
Yeah,
it was. It was an impossible task. So my question to you, DJ, I'm going to kick it to you first. Does it work in either respect?
Okay, that's a great question. Starting question. So yes and no. So I obviously, as a fan of The Shining, I was going to flock to this movie. Look, The Shining is one of the greatest movies ever made, period. In any genre, whether it's, I mean, you don't have to be a Stanley Kubrick fan to like The Shining, whether it's the technology, the Steadicam, that was one of the first movies to use the Steadicam. I mean, it's a what do they call it? A modern day classic horror movie. Yeah. So I see it from 2 points of view. Naturally, we were going to see this movie as a sequel to The Shining, the movie, and nothing is going to hold up to that. I mean, it's just not. No matter who's directing it, no matter what the budget is, nothing is going to hold up to that, because I also think that The Shining, the original movie, was lightning in a bottle. Like, a lot of things aligned to make that movie what it was, right? So in that aspect, no, this movie doesn't live up to that. But I saw it more as what you were saying earlier. This is a continuation of the story that is an adaptation of the book. So I see Dr. Sleep as the movie adaptation of the book, not necessarily the sequel to The Shining, the movie. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're going to compare both movies.
It's natural.
And it should be compared. And even though I'm saying this to you, I went in there comparing this movie with the original movie. But when I get critical about it and I say, well, but this is different, and no, but this is kind of cheesy, or no, this didn't work, then I'm like, right, but this is not an adaptation. This is not a sequel to the Shining movie. If anything, it's a sequel cinematically to, I mean, if depending the way you see it, to the Shining TV movie or
with Steven Weber.
Yeah, that they did back in the day. But that's I see it from 2 points of view. It was never going to live up to the original movie, nor should it. So
fair.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was watching this the first time, so when I watched this last night, it was the second time ish at the Pedro Let Me Tell You podcast chiming in saying hashtag justice for Weber. Agreed. Always more Steven Weber. This is the second time that I'd watched this one, and the first time when I watched it, I didn't realize everything that they were trying to accomplish, everything that you kind of wrapped up there in the beginning. And so the first time through, I was floored by finding the connections to both things. I was thinking, man, that's great. Like I was very interested in that. And not that it's less interesting this time, but I got more out of it this time as a standalone film, because since I'd seen it already, I wasn't simply watching for Shining connections. I was just watching and trying to focus on just the story and what I got here in Dr. Sleep. So to come at it from kind of the other side of what DJ's looking at, I think that as a standalone movie, this is really, really good. And not saying that I don't think it's good as a sequel, but just looking at that one thing, I think that they do just enough here to tie it to the other one to where even if you've never seen The Shining, you get the idea of what happened without them pulling a Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where they explain everything that happened, in the first act.
And shit went down in the Overlook. That's
right,
all.
Exactly. It's like something scary happened to this child, and now he's a grown up with issues. And then you get back, and like if you've never seen The Shining, you're like, whoa. Look at this abandoned hotel. This is dope. And so there are all the threads there to connect it to The Shining, but there's also enough story here to make a very good movie. I found myself enjoying this more the second time through because I wasn't just viewing it as the sequel to The Shining. I was viewing it as just watching a movie called Dr. Sleep. And that brought me more joy when I watched this last night, because I remember when we decided to do this, when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen that. It's all right. Like, that'll be a good one. And then as it started rolling, I'm sitting there watching and going, I don't remember this being this good. I don't remember, but the first time through, I was tied up on silly stuff like you wish you looked like Shelley Duvall, stuff like that. Like, and so now now that I was past all that, I just watched for the story that was presented to me here by Dr. Sleep. And what we got was a story with some great protagonists, great antagonists, some scary moments. Could it have been scarier? Probably, and we'll get there. But it had some really great stuff in there that just kind of washed past me the first time because I was just trying to look for Shining connections. So I enjoyed it more as a standalone film this go round than when I was viewing it as a sequel. And so that was really cool for me upon second watch this time, because I do think that as a standalone film, there's a lot of really good stuff here, and it tells a complete story. Because how often do we watch horror movies where we're expected to piece together somebody's past anyway? That's part of the movie, is just piecing together what the protagonist has been through that's left them this, alcoholic mess. And so you get those pieces that, like DJ said, shit went down at the Overlook, and now you can figure it out. And watching it that way, I liked it more.
Yeah, and you know why I think I hadn't thought about it in the way that you explained it about a standalone movie, but I think that one of the reasons why I can pull that off is because in Dr. Sleep, there is a defined villain.
Yes.
There's a defined villain. The True Knots, Rosa Hat. So this is what's going to set the story, right? Whereas in the Shining, the villain is what, the hotel? Like,
it's an ethereal force.
Yes.
Right. So, but here there is like a tangible villain or villains that you can, to go with what you said, you can kind of not know the specifics of the backstory and just be focused on this story and this plot and still enjoy the movie.
Right.
And the ride.
I have to agree with what everyone has said here, particularly with what you said, Daniel, that you liked it more the second time around. This is now the third time that I've seen it. I've yet to watch the director's cut, which I'm really interested in watching, because I know that there are a couple of extra scenes that are added there. And each time I do like it more and more, because the more I watch it, the less dependent it becomes upon what came before.
Right.
And the more it stands on its own legs. The beautiful thing is that the more that you disassociate the movie with The Shining, the better what concerns The Shining becomes. Because Thomas Elliott's performance of Jack Torrance is absolutely brilliant in its own way, because it is not Jack Torrance as played by Jack Nicholson.
Did you guys know that was him the first time you saw it? Because I didn't.
Yeah, I did. Only because I knew that Flanagan had worked with him so much. So when I saw him, I was like, hang on a second, who is that? And then I was like, oh, fuck, that's
Elliot.
That's Elliot, yeah. Yeah, he had worked with him quite a bit at that point already. So I kind of expected it. But it was a shock, because I had no idea that Jack was going to be in the movie.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting, because you see almost like an alternate reality version of these characters that you already have become so familiar with, because it's not Shelley Duvall, but it kind of is. It's not Scatman Carruthers, but it kind of is.
Yeah, to the point where I had a moment. Sorry, I was far away from the mic to put my dog out. I had a moment where I was looking. I was like, "Look, I know that's not Scatman Carruthers, but also, like, is it though? Is this man not aging? I need to know."
Well, and that's the cool thing about this, is that because it's not a true sequel to the film, and because it's not a true adaptation of the novel, of either novel,
right,
it can exist in this like weird space where it can be what it wants to be. And I think when you start looking at it as this perfect amalgamation of reconciling what came before with what is there now, because how do you adapt a sequel to a novel that was adapted into one of the most iconic movies of all time, which is drastically different from the novel? It, like we've said, it's an impossible task, and he found a way of doing it while being incredibly respectful of both sources.
Right.
And is it as scary as one would want from a Stephen King adaptation? Not throughout. No. I do agree with that. I feel like the story takes over so often because the story is so damn good.
Yes.
That you can just get lost in the story. Like, I feel like they could have spent an hour on just the true knot.
Yeah.
And I would have been okay with it. And we're talking about a movie that's already over 2 hours long.
Yes.
Right. So, which isn't long by most standards, but by horror movie standards, it's like, all right, come on, kill someone else. Right.
Right. Yeah. Like,
so,
we always talk about that 90-minute mark, right? Like,
right.
Especially with horror. It's like, what are you going to do here?
Right. Yeah. And we're half an hour over that 90-minute mark. So it's incredible to me what was accomplished here. Because even though it's not scary the whole time, when it is scary, I feel like it's fucking terrifying.
Yeah, but I think that's consistent with the original, because the original with the movie, the original, it is a Shining. The Shining's not a gory movie, so you know how you couldn't take it in that direction, because then it was just going to turn into something that it wasn't. But it's just terrifying. When it's scary, I don't think it's scary. I think it's terrifying. Like you have this anxiety with the score and the music and the tone of like, oh my God. Like, yeah. And I think that's why the Shining, to me, it's like it is a psychological thriller, because it really plays with your head and your emotions. It's not so much like a shock. It's like you're constantly like this throughout the whole movie. So
that is how Kubrick approached it. He didn't approach it as a horror movie. Everyone else called it horror. Yeah, I don't think he ever did.
I don't know if he did. I know that they always consider it a psychological thriller. I mean, obviously it gets thrown in the horror genre, but did you guys catch, because I didn't catch this the first time around either, the whole references to 1980?
Yes, I have notes of like every time that I saw a 1980 reference. Like I get really hung up on like looking at house numbers and stuff when I watch movies and trying to make them make sense. This one was really easy. Sometimes it's not. But so as we're talking, you were talking about, is it be terrifying? Is it scary? We're talking about stuff like that. But so what we have here is the story of Dan and Abra and their fight against the Knot. And the Knot is out there just taking out, they call them people with steam, but it's what we know as people with the shine. So when we're looking at just this one, and we're talking about the story of Dan and Abra versus the Knot, is this, and I mean, you kind of approached this already, Dave, so I'll go to you first. I mean, is it a satisfying story?
I think so. In fact, I think that the story is its greatest asset, because you have even though it's just it's the only time that we ever see this villain, Rose the Hat, is in this movie, in this book. I think that what Rebecca Ferguson did was like amazing. Like I would call it iconic at this point. Her look is one that just like, it sends chills down my spine when I see it now, because there's something about the True Knot and what they do that just works. Are they shining, or are they more akin to vampires? Right. The really interesting thing is seeing this so quickly after watching Oculus is the thing with the eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, is he trying to say something with what they are with the eyes? Is there any connection to Oculus and some of his previous work here? I don't know. Just trying to find something, right? maybe I'm grasping at straws, right? But I definitely think that the story is its best aspect. Now, the story itself, I don't think is scary. Like the story in The Shining is scary.
Right.
This on its own is not scary, but the True Knot is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, as intense as The Shining can be, all those scenes of Jack running down the Overlook hallways, chasing Danny, chasing Wendy with that crazed look in his eye and an axe in his hand, Wendy, that shit like is terrifying. It's really scary. It doesn't scare me. It doesn't affect me the way that the True Knot does in this. In particular, the scene where Trevor dies. The way that they say, okay, this kid is something special. We haven't seen something like him in a long time. And then the way that they do that, to me, was so affecting.
So truth be told, to I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to go on that because I think it's very important what you just said. And maybe it hit you different because you're the father of, well, now 2 boys. I have an 8-year-old, and when I saw that movie, that part, it really affected me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because he sounded like my son so much more that when I've watched the movie, I've fast forwarded that part. And that's not something I generally do in a movie, but that affected me so much that no, I don't need to see that part. I don't need to see again. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, David, but I thought that was like that hit me right there.
Well, I mean, we all have boys, and so I agree with you, man. And you're talking about the true knot just being terrifying, and I do this every episode. There's always somebody else that I just refer to as. I just keep calling her Jenny Lind, right? But when Rose is on top of him, and there's, you always get these scenes where somebody's getting murdered. That's what we do on this podcast. But there's something there's always something scarier about a person who revels in the killing and the torture and stuff like that, right? There's always makes it freakier because it's like, okay, this person's broken. But then to get them and they're reveling in it because for them, there is a positive outcome to your pain and your suffering. So they're doing more on purpose. That moment when she says something along the lines of the pain cleanses the steam or something like that. And the fear cleanses the steam, the pain increases it, something along those lines. She delivers that line.
Purifies the steam.
There we go. Purifies. Yeah. The way she delivers that line, it's not even just matter of factly, like she's saying it from a textbook.
You understand.
It's just, there's genuine like feeling behind that to where she's so happy that he's screaming and in pain. Like that moment, that scene is yes, terrifying. But that moment when she says that, man, like it just shot straight up my back. To hear her say it, like I was, that scene is rough. Yes, exactly. They need that. That's what's crazy about it.
And I have to tell you that I thought that scene that has been, because generally in even in horror movies, like the death of a child is something that is many times alluded to. It's not necessarily explicitly shown, but they went there in this movie, and
twice.
Yeah, and it was that is something you don't see every day. And they didn't like, put the camera somewhere else and you heard the kid screaming. I mean, no, you were front and center for this poor little boy being butchered, and that was actually shocking. I wasn't expecting that when I first saw it. And as I said, it impacted me so much that I fast forwarded. I'm like, I see what's happening, but I'm like, I don't need to see this part again.
I didn't want to fast forward through it this time. I say this time as if I've done it before. I haven't. But I knew I didn't want to see it. Because when I saw it in the theaters, obviously, it's there. It's going to happen. I have no idea what's going on until it's there. The second time I saw it, it was the most affecting part of the movie. So I knew it was coming up and I was like preparing myself for it. This time around, I was like, okay, because we're going to do the podcast, I want to see the whole movie all the way through. I don't want to leave anything out. And I cried. It was and if you watch some of the special features that's included with the movie, on the Blu-ray and stuff like that, Mike Flanagan talks about how he purposefully chose this actor, Tremblay. What's his name? His first name? Can't remember now. And he chose him because he is one of the most famous child actors today. And he wanted such a recognizable face of innocence to be in all of our minds, right? And that apparently he had been preparing this for weeks before he came onto the set. And when they started rolling camera for that scene, everyone kind of just took a step back and was like, whoa, what's going on? All these actors, which were so gung-ho to like murder this child.
Right.
Were, like the scene ended and Flanagan was like, that was great. You did an awesome job. Everyone else, your take was unusable. Because they felt the way we did.
How very Stanley Kubrick of him.
Right.
Did he need to do it 146 times?
I don't think they did it 146 times. I don't think he slapped anyone around. But yeah, to me, that the movie, when it is terrifying, is absolutely terrifying, and more so than The Shining.
And I think that scene was necessary because before that, you know, we see them as like these kind of like messed up sort of hippie-ish group, you know, that lives in like a compound and whatever. But I think that scene was necessary for you to really see the you know, how far these people are willing to go to get the steam. And it does the job. It makes you really loathe them and hate them, which is necessary for this, obviously.
Ish commenting on our previous comment says, "Oh, but for Shelley Duvall, it was okay." Kids today, I tell you.
Yeah, I love the story. The story of Danny Torrance here that we're presented with is given to us in such a great way. Quick reminder of the absolute traumatic past that he's had, to flash forward to, man, this guy's a piece of shit, to get, you know, a guy who's trying to get better, then flash forward, okay, now he's a guy who's better, but his past catches him again and he has to confront it. The story of Danny Torrance that we get here is really, really great. I do love that they give us a little bit of everything. They don't start us off with him get 8 years sober and talking about how he was an alcoholic because of the trauma in his life. We get that, but it's after we get, you know, we don't get a long detailed thing, but you know, one life in the night of alcoholic Danny Torrance, I got a pretty good idea of what this dude's existence is about. Like at this point, right? You know,
yeah.
Oh, okay. So you beat a guy to death with a pool ball. Okay, yeah. And then you were going to steal money. If she had the kids, you were still going to steal the money. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sure. Yeah. You're.
You know what really got me of Danny, you know, modern day Danny Torrance was this when he talks about when his mom died and the thing with the flies.
Yeah.
That I thought was very subtle and subtly terrifying as well, because you obviously get an image of that and it was like, oh, this is not this is not fun.
And it's really great to get this redemption arc out of somebody who for 40 years his whole life, to our knowledge, has just been this one horribly traumatic winter. That's all that existed of Danny Torrance before we saw this. And so to get this really good and a redemption arc that makes sense. He didn't go, you know, have to go to court and was forced to take it. This is a guy who realized he'd hit rock bottom and did it for himself, which is a really cool thing. That trope of having to do it because you got caught doing something and the judge made you. All right, yeah, fine. I've seen Doc Hollywood too, right? But the idea of him realizing and choosing to get better, I really, really liked that, because I think that for all the movies we have with some sort of addict as a protagonist, I feel like we don't get enough movies where somebody is genuinely just trying to better themselves, not because they killed someone or slapped their wife or did something awful, but just because your rock bottom doesn't have to be a felony, right? It can just be coming face to face with the darkness that your life has become. And I really, really loved this idea that he just got a look at his life, like a stone cold look at his life, and just chose to get better. And then he took all the steps, and they even, like I said, fast forwarded us 8 years. So it wasn't like he was some guy who shot through AA in record time. they made us fully aware of the fact that 8 years later, he is still struggling with this. And we should be proud of the fact that Danny's 8 years sober. And it was just a really good story arc with a trope that's not used as well as it could be a lot of the time. And that was something that I got out of it this time that I didn't get that last time, was watching for the redemption of Danny Torrance. And I loved that. I've never gone through a program or anything like that, but I have friends who have been through those, and I have a lot of personal connections. And it was great to see it presented in a realistic way. And I loved that.
I think that's a good segue into a section that I called steam powered.
Oh, dude, you're
really witty.
Show notes titles were amazing today.
Sometimes I'm really on point, and then sometimes I'm
just write
lazy. Yeah, I just say story, characters, technical. Today I was a little extra. So steam powered, right? We have a cast that is, I think, just as talented as it is diverse.
Right.
And so when we're looking at this, right, we have these incredible portrayals of characters that we're familiar with, characters that are new. Is there anyone that, or multiple ones that stand out for you? And if so, why? DJ, we'll throw it to you first.
So I don't know the actor's name, but Rosa Hatt's love interest.
Crow Daddy.
Zach McLaren.
Okay.
Or Zahn McLaren.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because when I was watching it this week again, I was looking up the name of all the actors. I thought he was so good because the scenes when he kidnaps Abra, and he's just so cool driving the van, and it's like, yeah, I'm taking you to be like killed, and like a lot of good people died today, you know.
Yeah,
people on your side, just like how calmly he was, and he wasn't overly sinister about it either. And it was just so
very matter of fact. Yeah.
Yes. So it was cold, but not also cold like that you hated him. He just seemed like he was having a regular conversation with this girl. And, I often think, is this what the actor put into it? Like how the actor portrayed this character in this scene, or is that what it was supposed to be? Like, those are the things that I always wonder in a movie, if this is what that actor brought to it.
Well, and
because it was just so cool.
That scene, and you're right, and everything's so chill and so matter of fact, and then he realizes that it's not Abra, and still no tone change, sudden whip around to look and see if she look just like, oh, this is an interesting trick. Like, who are you now?
But you can see it in his eyes. There's like, I'd say it's beyond interest. I wouldn't quite call it fear, but there's a caution maybe that changes, that's introduced into his eyesight, because the way he looks up into that rear view mirror and he's trying to see what's going on back there, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
it's really, really great.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. The initial one, of course, is going to be Rose the Hat, right? Yeah. And you look, and y'all, if y'all were looking for criticism from me about somebody who just happened upon a random witch in the woods in a cool hat and fell in love with her, you ain't gonna find it, right? Like, been there, okay? I get it. I like to think that Mike Flanagan went to Rebecca Ferguson and was like, okay, so you're gonna, you're Rose the Hat, okay? You've read, yeah. Here's what we're thinking. Stevie Nicks, like, what if she were evil? It's like that's the vibe, right? I need you to be the bizarro Stevie Nicks, and then she just slayed it. Like, it just incredible on it. You know, those moments when she's looking in on when her crew just gets massacred.
Oh man.
And just like every time one of them gets shot and she's just like in more and more pain. It's just this incredible performance. She goes from freaked out to, or, you know, like from just noticing that there's a seer to freaked out to how powerful she is to super evil and pissed off. And every bit of it is believable. Mm-hmm. That's what gets me about her performance is every single thing she does. I don't feel like I'm watching her play a different part. I genuinely feel like she just has this range within character. It was never like she became a different character. Oh, this is angry Rose. No, this is Rose when she's angry. And while that is, you know, a ticky-tacky semantic difference, I do think that there's a big difference there. It's keeping in character while showing us that range. I loved her, and I mean, like she's just gorgeous. Gosh, she's so gorgeous. Yeah. And like I said, she's always Jenny Lynn in the heart, right? But gosh, she was amazing.
The one that immediately comes to mind for me is also Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat. And for everything that you said, so I'm not going to add to that. So I'll talk about who to me is the second person I gravitate towards, which is Ewan McGregor as Dan. It's to me, it's incredible how he's able to show his own performance of Dan, but also harken back to the helplessness of Danny. Right. Because there's Dan and there's Danny. And also get at the disparity of Jack. Because there's all of that found in his performance. Stephen King has said that The Shining is about a man who's afraid of losing his family to the drink, and that Dr. Sleep is about the man who has found redemption in moving away from the drink. And we see a lot of that intensity there. I love the scene where Dan comes back into his room and he's got that bottle of scotch that Abra's dad was drinking. Right. And he's looking at it and he's about to take that swig and he gets dangerously close. Dangerously close. And maybe it even touched his lips. And that's why he, you know, pulls it away in such a repulsive way and shatters it across the floor. I mean, to me, I don't know if Ewan McGregor has ever struggled with addiction. But it looks like he has, because there was a truth to that where you can tell that this guy really, really put himself in here, where even though Dan is king, and King has said that every protagonist in his books, he never sees them because he's looking through their eyes. They are him in some way. So Dan is king, but he was also Ewan McGregor. And that's, to me, there's few characters in this movie that come to life the way that his does. And this is a movie filled with characters that are brought to life. Because Crow Daddy's incredible. Because Rose the Hat's incredible. Abra's incredible.
Yeah, Kylie Kernan, and she was 14. Like when this movie came out. And she does this really good job. There's this really cool idea of the not scared teenage female protagonist that is underexplored, and then sometimes when it is explored, it's done so ham-fistedly. And what we got here with this performance out of Kylie Curran wasn't that. We got a kid who was confident but not cocky.
Yes, yes. She had a little bit of sass, right? But it wasn't like what they usually resort to in movies with teenagers, that they, it is about the sass, and they know better than you and they argue with you. She had enough to make it believable that yes, she was a young lady. She was 13, 14 years old, but enough to, as you said, okay, but she is confident. Like, she's gonna take this on.
Yeah, like she was never, just straight up damsel in distress, but also it wasn't to that point where you're like, oh God, like I don't care if they kill you, which happens sometimes when you're watching a horror movie, and there's one of those characters you're like, well, if you die, it doesn't affect me. She never
unlikable hero,
exactly.
It's not that.
And so
I think a lot of that has to do with the way the character is written, and I don't mean her attitude or her disposition. I mean the fact that Stephen King created a character that is in every possible way so much more powerful than every other character that I don't think she ever really needs to fear.
Yeah, true enough. She was OP.
Yeah, she's just totally overpowered. You would think that after she's just decimated all of the True Knot, with the exception of Rose, and she sees Spectre Rose on the road, looking horrifying and beautiful. Like it was a total fear boner. I was watching and I was like, please murder me.
Yeah, exactly.
She was she walked right through her. Like,
yes,
whatever. I'm on my way somewhere. Get out of my way.
She looked right at her and she was like, you mean nothing to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's incredible. That's and so when she finally meets her in the flesh at the Overlook, she's not afraid. She's not afraid.
She was staying outside and waiting for the lights at the Overlook. Like, sure. Any random Tuesday.
The moment that Rose realizes that she's been had by Danny, it's interesting because it's like it's a shared mind thing.
Yeah, very Inception.
Yeah, it's very Inception, because Abra's in his mind, and that's how they were able to trick her. But even in there, like, Abra's not afraid ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Also, I mean, when you're looking at her power, they're in Danny's mind. They're very clear about that. Mm-hmm. But she still seems to. Abra still seems to have some ability to like exploit it, right? Mm-hmm. Because she's in front of her and then she's gone, and she's behind her. She slashes the knee. She sees her. She's gone. Like, there does still seem to be some ability on Abra's part, while being in someone else's thoughts, dreams, whatever. She still has the ability to manipulate them to what she needs to happen in that moment. So again, it just plays to what her power was in that situation, which is really cool. She did a great job with that. And it's refreshing, because, we talk about it. It's great when kids play kids, and usually we're going, oh, so it felt realistic. This didn't feel like a kid playing a kid. It felt like a kid playing an adult, which is something that we don't get to say very often on this podcast. But she did it in a way that was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she was really good.
And so, we've talked about the fact that this is a sequel to The Shining, and there's a lot that happens here that is only tangentially related to The Shining. Outside of The Shining, the actual thing, The Shining, and Dan Torrance, most of this movie takes place in a realm where The Shining never had to happen. But then we get that moment, and we're back home sweet home at the Overlook Hotel. What is easily one of the most iconic settings, not just in horror movie history, but in movie history. That carpet, those elevator doors, everything that we see there. When we think about the idea of going back there, how significant was it to you that we go back to the Overlook? And I got to go to you on first on this one, DJ, since you've been to the actual inspiration for the Overlook Hotel. How how significant was it to you that we ended back there? That's where it all happens.
Well, when I saw the movie in the theater, I literally jumped in my seat when I was like, "Oh, we're at the Overlook!" When you know that, like, before they show the hotel on the outside, you have that scene when they're going through the mountains,
the sweeping shot. Yeah,
it's the same sweeping shot as in the original. I was like, "Oh my god!" I mean, look, I think everybody was expecting that. Everybody, from an audience perspective, everybody was expecting to be back at the Overlook in some capacity. So yes, that was very important. And I think because this story is the culmination of Danny, it made total sense that it was at the Overlook. It was symbolic. And I think that, especially now, since at the end of the movie, he now is a ghost, if you will, and now he speaks to Abra. I think that if you were going to kill off Danny, which makes sense in the movie, in the story, it had to be in the Overlook. It just had to. It couldn't be anywhere else. And especially in the way that he died, that he wasn't killed by someone else. He died in the hotel, by the hotel. I think that's an integral part of just the story. Because, I mean, whether you're talking about Dr. Sleep, the book, or Dr. Sleep, or The Shining, the novel, the main character is the Overlook Hotel. Right. And there's few movie stories, what have you, that a character is like a building that really is a character in a movie or in a story. And that is the Overlook to this set of stories. So it has to be in it in some way. And I thought that the way that they did it at the end with the score, I mean, they used the score at the perfect time. They kept teasing you throughout the movie, throughout the beginning. It all made sense, and it made the story what it is.
Dave?
For me, it was incredibly important that they go back there because it's where the story begins. Right. And so to end the story where it begins, I mean, we don't know if at some point King is going to write, a third part to this and make it a trilogy.
He waited plenty long between the first two. So
yeah, I don't think he can wait that long. Just as a matter of fact, I don't think he can.
That's just science.
But in the novel, Dan lives. Dan and Abra live at the end of the novel. So it's possible that there's something more to the story. Taking it for what it is right now, which is a part 1 and a part 2, this is, to me, like it had to happen this way. Because in the novel, the original novel, it burns down.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Jack has avoided doing what it is that he needs to do around the Overlook because he's pretty much been possessed by it, right? And that's kind of what happens here. Yes. And I think this is the most significant way that Flanagan puts that spin on this, where it's like it's not quite an adaptation of the novel, and it's not quite a sequel to the movie. It's this like special area where it's doing both these things and doing none of those things at the same time. Mm-hmm. Because it's not, the Colorado Lounge isn't exactly the way it was.
Right.
Flanagan says this. He says, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. So I made it my version of the Colorado Lounge. And so we finally get to see this boiler room.
Okay.
And that, to me, like that's such an incredible thing, because Dan finally assumes the role that we should have seen Jack take in that first movie.
Right.
And we get the exact same line that Danny tells Jack, that you're not my dad. You're just a mask, and you're the hotel. And that's what makes him drop that. Like it was so great to go back there. It needed to happen there, and the fact that we see it all happen in its own particular idiom, where it's not Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance, it's Thomas Elliott's Jack Torrance. It's not Shelley Duvall's Wendy Torrance. It's Alex Esso, I think her name is. It's her Wendy Torrance, and we get to see the Grady twins, and we get to see Delbert Grady, and we get to see all of them. Miss Massey, we get to see them all, and it's incredible because they are hearkening back to those original characters, but in a unique way, in their own particular way. And so, in a lot of ways, it is and it isn't the Overlook Hotel. It's its own special little place that allows this movie to exist in both those universes, and it functions as a plot device, but it also functions as a way to bring about that nostalgia, where you see where you see the carpet and you're like, fuck, that's the carpet in my nightmares, right? where you see that mint green bathroom and you're like, fuck, no, I know what's coming, you know. You hear even the big wheel going from carpet to wood floor to rug back to carpet. It's iconic, and it sounds like it, but it doesn't, because it's fresh and it's new, and it's almost like what happened in Ready Player One, where we got to go back to the Overlook Hotel, right, and we got to experience it with all of those players, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's a fresh and new take on the Overlook, and to me, the movie would not have worked as well had it been a straight adaptation of Dr. Sleep and not gone back to the Overlook.
Yeah, there's a word that you used right at the end there where you just said it. You know, there's the nostalgia to it, but it's not something that they killed. You know, they didn't give us half of the movie in the Overlook. They went back. They gave us just enough, which, you know, you referenced Ready Player One. I enjoy the book Ready Player One a lot, but watching the movie, like the sensory overload of the nostalgia it's such heaping amounts for such an amount of time, it does get to be a bit much. And this movie does it just right. This is something where they go back, they give us just enough of what happened there to remember. You see the typewriter, you know, Dan has got the axe. We see the holes in the doors, just a couple of flashbacks. But, and we said something about this up at the top. My favorite thing about going back was this idea that Dan would get to confront his dad, where, you know, he'd given the speech about how the only way he could ever relate to his dad was when he was blackout drunk. Then now he could relate to him because he had gotten clean, but now he gets to be face to face with him. He's saying he's Lloyd, but we're looking at him, we're like, okay. But the other thing is, I love that when we went back, I do love this portrayal of the Jack Torrance character by Henry Thomas. I really, really like what he brought to.
Should have been calling him Thomas Elliott. It is Henry Thomas. Thank you.
It is Henry Thomas. Yeah, I wasn't going to call you out. I was just going to drop it right there and then see if you just kind of let it roll.
Thomas Elliott,
because he's fucking Elliott and his last name's Thomas. That's what the fuck I was like, how did I get there?
Yeah. So this portrayal of Jack Torrance by Henry Thomas, because he didn't try to be Jack Nicholson's Torrance, right? He didn't do that, and I think that was really important, because when we go back to the Overlook, we're not, if you're Dan and the house is messing with you, it's not going to show you the version of your dad that attempted to kill you and your mother. If it genuinely wants to pull you in and get you drunk and pull you to the dark side like it did your dad, it's going to show you a version of him that is more touching to you. And so I think it's really, really important that we did get somebody different, and he didn't try to put on the, everybody and their mom's got a Jack Nicholson impersonation, right? He didn't try to do that. He was just enough Jack. And I think that was really important. I think that they did a lot of like great quick shots and stuff like that just reminded us of what the Overlook looked like. But one of my favorite Overlook callbacks in this movie wasn't actually at the Overlook. I love that when he meets the doctor who runs the AA meetings and he goes into that doctor's office.
Oh my God. Yes. It's exactly the same.
It's the manager's office from the Overlook in the first one, complete with the impossible window, like the weird mailbox that doesn't seem to be stacked right. The walls that seem too narrow, the Pepto-Bismol color. It's the same office.
Short Omen.
Yeah, and like that's the first moment when you're like, "Whoa, creepy."
But I feel that those are like Easter eggs.
Yeah. Right? No,
Yeah.
absolutely. But like that was like my favorite one, because that office is one of my favorite things in The Shining, because I love all the conspiracy theories about the impossible window, right? Yeah. So I love that they like put a tree behind it, like, but this one's a real window. So don't spend 40 years of your life in chat rooms talking about how this window shouldn't exist. There's a tree beyond it. So they went ahead and squashed that. But I loved that being in there. But I agree with you guys. You had to go back there, because that was the final nail in this being that ultimate bridge. Was just that idea of, all right, look, a lot of people were upset that Jack didn't go out like this, so we're going to get you that ending, and now we're going to let Danny go out like a boss, and it worked. It worked, and they did a great job with it.
Let me ask you guys something, because this is it's something I had always thought about in terms of the first movie, and definitely now with this one, because you could certainly make the argument that Dr. Sleep is a bookend. It could continue, but it could also be a bookend. Instead of a third part, wouldn't it be great to have a prequel of
to see
what
Delbert Grady's story?
Yeah, to see Grady's story.
I want to go back to July 4th, 1921. Like what happened? Why? Like, I've always thought that, like, with the picture of Jack in July 4th ball, like, what happened there? Like, I've always wanted to know. And with this movie, potentially it could be a bookend. I would love to see a prequel, like, what happened in the Overlook, and you could have the character of Jack Torrance or that incarnation of whatever it is. I think that would be a great kind of like go at in terms of the story, because why is the Overlook?
Right.
I mean, things happen there. Supposedly it was an Indian burial ground. I mean, yes, all these theories, but what happened there? Yes, we talk about it in the first movie. A lot of things have happened here in the Overlook. It's like burnt toast, but what happened?
Yeah, but like what?
Yeah.
And there's something in particular that you mentioned, and it reminded me of something. The Jack that we see in the Gold Room, which I think is the most significant version of Jack that we see in the movie, because we've got that flashback of Henry Thomas as Jack running down the halls, daddy boy, that's great, that's awesome, but that's him doing Jack Nicholson do Jack Torrance.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When he's in the Gold Room, he's no longer doing Jack Nicholson do Jack Torrance. He's doing the Jack Torrance that now is part of the Overlook.
Right.
And it's a different Jack. It's a Jack that is equivalent to what Grady was earlier, because Grady doesn't seem to be the same man who murdered his family. He doesn't seem to really know that happened, that his daughters are here. He's just always been there. The same way that Lloyd has always been there.
Yeah, that's how I see it, that it's whatever the entity of Jack Torrance is now Lloyd. So it's incarnation of Lloyd is now the entity of Jack Torrance. So it's similar but different but similar.
Right.
Which totally works in a new movie with a new actor, because it doesn't have to be the same. Because it's not.
And I'd be interested to find out if in a prequel Jack is still there. Since he's now a part of the entire history of the Overlook, will Jack be there to fuck with Grady? Will Jack be there to fuck with the other guests?
He is.
And I don't want that to be like the focus of it. But if there's like just one scene in there somewhere,
he was there in 1921, so he is for sure there.
And there's this idea to be had about that like the Overlook is quantum. Like Dave, you said something earlier where you were like, when you're talking about this being the bridge between book and movie and sequel and all this, and there was a phrase you used where it was like it's both of those things and it's neither of those things, right? Like that's such a great way to describe just the Overlook in general, because there's that idea that once you become a part of the Overlook, then you're instantaneously part of the entire history of the Overlook. Like the Overlook the Overlook exists everywhere, whatever that movie. I was going to try to name that.
Everything Everywhere All at
Once. There we go. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Right. There's this idea that the Overlook is like this quantum entity, and so he was there, and he's always been there to talk to Dan in the future too, because you become the Overlook, which is omnipresent.
Mm-hmm. I like it. So the last
so many ways you could go with it, because now Danny is a part of the Overlook,
right?
So
and how will he interact with his dad? How will he interact with everyone else?
Yeah.
Oh man,
when he gets to meet Bathtub Lady before she's gross.
Now that's interesting.
I'm pretty sure that
movie exists.
I'm waiting for Bathtub Lady to get out and be naked and hot. Like,
well, she is only for a split second.
Yeah.
Like,
for 1980 hot.
Right. Where's the extended cut of that? That's what I'm looking for.
But that's what I was saying about a prequel. What happened in Room 237?
Right.
Which honestly, that's part of why it makes it so scary, that we don't know what happened there, right? That's part of the whole thing of the Overlook, that we know, but we don't know. So we can only guess what happened there. And what happened in Room 237, what's her significance? That's what makes it scary. So, I mean, I guess if you really don't want to continue that trajectory, yes, let's not have a prequel. But, for us who really want to know, like, sure.
So the last thing that I think we should talk about before we rate this movie is something I call the Flanagan factor. Because alliteration's awesome, right? And so I think in this movie, what we get is as much respect for Stanley Kubrick as an individualized voice, right? Vision, Flanagan's vision, right? What does that accomplish for a movie that is trying to stand on its own and function as a sequel? And DeBone, I'll throw it to you. What does Flanagan bring to the table here in this style?
What we're always going to talk about, and we love Mike Flanagan. We've made no qualms about that. If anybody listening knows the guy, send him over to shiverpod.com. So what we're always going to talk about with Mike Flanagan he knows what's scary. Like, he gets it. He knows how to scare in all the different ways. He understands what DJ very eloquently stated earlier about how the movie's terrifying, but not necessarily scary. Mm-hmm. He knows where to draw that line. He understands the depth of what it takes to scare people at different levels. What he also is always going to bring is there is an unbridled passion for the horror genre that this man has that is few and far between. And he is somebody who, man, he just gets it and he loves it, and he never wants to present something that he doesn't feel is respectful of the genre, respectful of, in this case, the source material. And a part of that source material being the fact that as much as the original Shining is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, it's a Stanley Kubrick film, which is something that, you know, one of the reasons that it draws a lot of ire. There are a lot of people like, oh, it's just a Stanley Kubrick film. I don't get it. And yeah, cool. I will never fault anybody for not getting Stanley Kubrick. It took me a long time, right? A long time to really start to pick up what this guy was doing and why it was a big deal. And so on top of just having, you know, the respect for Stephen King as somebody who did this, you can tell that there's a lot of love for Stanley Kubrick. While he did seek to bridge that gap, it wasn't like he set out with this idea of, okay, Stanley Kubrick screwed this up and I'm going to retcon this. No, he said, I need a way to make Stanley Kubrick's vision and Stephen King's vision both exist in the same reality. And he always seems to have respect for whatever he's doing, whether it be an established mythos, whether it be something new that he's creating. I can only assume that he is great with the people that work for him, because they always have such good performances. And so I think that the Flanagan factor is always going to boil down to respect for everything that goes into making a movie and taking that and then running with it. And that's what we get from him.
TJ?
Yeah, everything you just said. He had an impossible task here. He just did. I mean, this was whatever he did or didn't do was going to be criticized, right?
Right.
And there were people who were going to hate it. He had an impossible task. I enjoyed the fact that even the scenes of the Overlook, they were not copied. They weren't like the steady cam. They weren't necessarily slow like in the original movie, which he could have done that. He could have gone that route, and that would have been more of a copy. The scenes of the Overlook feel completely different, and I think that that's obviously what he brought into it. I think that he had more flexibility with the, you know, beginning of the movie with all the other scenes that don't take place in the hotel. I thought, for example, the scene where Rose gets her hand in the filing cabinet, ugh, I think that is so gory, right? Yeah. And it's funny because that didn't have to be gory, because she could have gotten her hand stuck in the filing cabinet and injured it and called it a day. But it was so gory, and I think that was probably one of the, you know, his visions of it, like, okay, this is going to be like really effed up, like, yeah, you know, which make it, you know, it's one added thing to the many that make the movie terrifying. So I appreciated that, despite the fact that this being an impossible task, even the parts that he had to go back and revisit from the original movie, they were not copies of the original. And that's, how do you balance that? So
yeah, it's that fine line between homage and, like you said, just copying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that part of that is that he truly throws himself into everything that he does. And we know that he's a fan of The Shining because he's spoken about it. As I have to imagine he's a fan of like Shirley Jackson and that's why he tackled something like The Haunting of Hill House, or he's a fan of The Turning of the Screw, and that's why he made The Haunting of Bly Manor. But there's a level of almost obsessiveness that has to go into being able to study someone's style. And I think that's what we have here, is that it was not a replication of scenes. It was a almost replication of style when necessary. Because as a musician, right, as a guitar player, I can play whatever I hear in my head and do it with ease because it's coming from me. But if I were to try to do a cover of, I don't know, a Led Zeppelin song, I would be playing that song the way I play the song. It takes a special kind of musician to replicate exactly the style that someone does without making it just a copy. Because I feel like almost anyone can say, this is what was done, we're going to do exactly the same thing. But it takes talent to say, this is how it was done. Let's do it like that.
let's do it like that.
And those are two very different things. It's not let's do what was done, but let's do it how it was done. Mm-hmm. Because you can do your own thing how it was done. Because we see the Grady twins and it's done a little differently.
Right.
But it's done in the same style, in that Kubrickian style, right? We see Jack coming down the hall and it's similar, but not exactly the same. But every time that we flash back, and those flashbacks are quick, man.
Yeah.
The movie does not rely on those flashbacks, but it adds a level of complexity to the film that I feel like only someone like Mike Flanagan can do, because he is, before everything else, a fan.
Yeah.
He loves horror the same way that you and I do, Daniel.
Yeah.
That the way that you occasionally do, Darren. And more so because I've never sat down and said, I love this so much, I'm going to make a movie. It's absolutely incredible. And then the fact that, his talent goes beyond being able to visualize shots. His talent as a writer, his talent as an editor. I mean, this guy does it all.
Yeah.
And I feel like that I'm a fan of comic books, and you can always tell who the real talent in a creative team is when a penciler has a new inker come on to their art. So like someone like Jack Kirby, who created Captain America and Thor and all these guys, he inked his own work. So his style. But there's guys like Frank Miller, who, revitalized Daredevil and Batman and all these guys. And his art looks very different.
Yeah.
When Klaus Janson is not inking his work. So that's how I feel about editors. And that's how I feel about writers. There's this mix that works. And when you remove one piece from that puzzle, sometimes it doesn't work so well. Mike Flanagan is the whole puzzle. If we were ever to have his movies edited by someone else, I think we'd start to see, oh, wait, no, bring him back. Put him back, put him back in the editor's chair, because it takes longer for him to get his work out there. Some directors put out, one a year. But it's been a year since or two since Midnight Mass, and he's been hard at work on what he's working on now.
Two things.
On two things. Yeah, this is incredible. I don't know that he's edited these shows,
because he's doing, what is it? It's Midnight Club, which is
Midnight Club,
it's like a teenage show.
Fall of the House of Usher.
Fall of the House of Usher.
So we'll see if there's a difference in quality there, but I really do think that he is the key there. He's got that Flanagan factor.
Which
And
is
to go with what you're saying, David, he could have taken the easy way out and sort of replicated it the way it was, and I think fanboys would have been happy. They would have been like, "Oh, we're back here again," in the same way.
Or just use stock footage. Just use the footage from before.
There we go.
Yeah, he could have done that, and he didn't. So he had the balls to go ahead and be like, "I'm gonna go ahead and take my shot or my stab at recreating this, which only happens to be one of the premier horror movies of all time." So no easy task.
Friend of the show, Andrew Chacon. Welcome, Andy. Glad you're here. He says there's a difference between ripoff and homage, and Flanagan was able to take something great and make it his own without ruining it. The guy is so underrated. Absolutely, he's so underrated.
Yeah, and he's underrated by us, and all we do is sing his praises, and yet I still feel like we don't do it enough.
Not enough.
This guy's incredible.
Yeah, he's married to, I think, one of the most gorgeous actresses working today, Kate Siegel, who works with him a lot, and I think she's the lucky one in the relationship. That's how much love I have for Mike Flanagan, and I still think he's underrated.
So that is going to take us to the last step, the last thing we've got to do, and that's where we've got to rate this film. Now, just as a reminder, we do only rate a movie against itself. So while we have spent a lot of time comparing this to The Shining, and DJ, I know it's going to be tough for you, we've got to just look at Dr. Sleep by itself, not comparing it to The Shining. So now the other thing is we create a unique rating system to help us do that. DJ, were you able to think of anything? We should rate it out of a 5 possible what?
I did. I give it 4 axes.
Just get axes. I like it. Solid. So you're going 4 axes?
Yes.
All right. Dave, what about you?
Dude, I'm giving it 5 axes. I think that both as a sequel to The Shining, the film, and as an adaptation of Dr. Sleep, this thing just works. It works in every possible way. It blows me away every time I watch it. Every time I watch it, I feel like I come to love it more and more. I feel like it's scary and it's disturbing and it's interesting more than anything, because I feel like there's movies that have great stories and don't scare, and then there's movies that scare but don't have great stories. And I feel like, is the balance always there? Not necessarily. I don't feel like it's scary the whole way through, but I also don't think that was the intention of the movie either. I think that there was such a focus on story because King and Flanagan were concerned about telling Dan's story. And I feel like we got that, and it was scary, and it was touching, and it was everything you wanted it to be. And Mike Flanagan, I love you, and please come on our show because you're the man.
Andy calling you up for your man crush here. So I can't. And I've got to now. Like, I've been like, all right, they're gonna vamp for a minute, and I'm finally gonna be able to make this call. And like, I'm still right there. And I'm trying to decide between 4.5 and 5. And I didn't think I would be that high going into it last night. But like I said, watching it last night, not just as a Shining sequel, but it's just the movie Dr. Sleep, put this movie over the top for me. And you know what? To hell with it. Yeah, I'm going 5 too. Yeah. It does so much. And Dave, you said it, there's always this idea of how do you balance story and scary? How do you create one that's good without taking away from the other? The idea that story versus scary isn't a pizza in this, right? You don't have to have less of one to have more of the other, is what really puts this over the top. We get some good we get some good scary moments, but the movie as a whole is terrifying. And I think that what is really putting it over for the top for me is when you made that distinction very early on in the show, DJ, because I said at the top, could it be scarier? Yes. And it could, but you were absolutely right in the fact that this movie is terrifying. It settles into you more so than it makes you jump. And that statement is putting me over the top. And I'm going 5 axes on this one.
So if I'm mathing correctly, which I know I'm not, 5 plus 5 plus 4 divided by 3 rounding up gives us 5. So we've got 5 axes. 5 axes. We got ourselves a perfect score here.
Yeah.
And I ain't complaining. Fuck, it's awesome. And fuck, this was awesome. DJ, dude, I love you, man. I'm so glad. And I love you, Jack. I love you, Jack. I'm so glad that we were finally able to do this, our epilogue to our summer movie fan fest. At least I'm calling it that. I mean, better that, make it significant.
Right.
It's a significant movie.
Exactly. We're tacking it on there like that episode of Sandman that just suddenly dropped all of a sudden, even though the series has been out for weeks, which, by the way, was spectacular.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh God, dude, so good. So DJ, before we go, let the people know where they can find you. How should they be listening to your show? Tell them about it, man.
Sure. Pero let me tell you, we are a current events podcast with, as my co-host Ish says, we talk about anything, everything, and nothing at all. It's current events and cultural issues from a Miami kind of Latin perspective. You can find us at Pero Let Me Tell You on Instagram. We have a Twitter, and we have now a TikTok. The podcast, the actual content, you can find it wherever your favorite podcasts are at. We're on Apple, on Google, on Stitcher, on Spotify. We're on all our platforms.
And if you have not checked them out yet, if you don't know that if they're going to do something that interests you, just go to their Spotify and scroll through their episodes, because I guarantee you're going to find a guest that they have had on the show that's going to interest you. You guys pull all sorts of people for the show. It's incredible who you've had on there. We've
had a really big roster of people. We both, Ish and I, have had like our dream guests come on the show. Like when we first started the show, we had a short list of like what our dream guests would be, and we're like, these people are never going to come on our show. These are like legit actors. Like they're not going to come on our show, and they have. So there's something for everyone, and it's funny, it's thought provoking, it's a good time.
Yeah,
I was listen, laugh, and learn.
There you go. It's a funny. Okay, so not being down in Miami, not being Hispanic or anything. One of my favorite things that I didn't realize was like a regular thing in conversation, I guess, when you're bilingual with English and Spanish. I love I think Jeff called it Spanglish, where like you guys are just talking and then just like a Spanish word just like flies in there like all the time. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about it that's listening that makes it feel really the authenticity really shines on your show. I think you guys are great.
Thank you. That's the ultimate compliment. Ish always says that the conversations we have on our show are conversations we would have. We're just recording them.
Right. So make sure you head over and check them out on all the stuff. You can also, if you are interested in more from us here at Shiver, you can head to the new and improved shiverpod.com, where you will find links to all of our social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also find links to download the podcast from wherever you may listen right there, and a link to our YouTube channel. And as you're out there and you're subscribing to all this stuff, we've gotten a lot of likes here recently. We appreciate everybody out there giving us likes, follows, all of that stuff. Big one right now, if you could hit that subscribe button on the YouTube, that would mean a lot to us. We've got to reach a certain number before we can get our own like youtube.com/Shiver Shiver Pod. And so I'm working on getting
It'd be nice to have a home.
Right, exactly. So we need some more subscribes on that. So if you watch us on here, if you're just listening, even if you don't watch us on here, but you have a YouTube account, go click that subscribe for us. It would mean the world. And we love every one of you guys who's out there commenting, sharing our memes, trying to have a lot of fun with it. Our John Carpenter one yesterday kind of took off. And so that was a lot of fun. So head to shiverpod.com where you can find the link to all of that stuff.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fright you very much.